Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about what I think are the 25 biggest and most impactful changes in the patch notes. Now, the first one I have to mention here, but I will be making a separate video about it with my in-depth thoughts, but it is Ancestral Bond and in general the spell totem changes. Ancestral Bond got reworked to only give you double the amount of totems that you already have. However, on top of that, they have no mana cost, they do not consume charges, and it only doubles the limit now, which does not really matter. It's not really a downside because at level 23, spell totems already give 3 maximum. So you go to 6, and that is going to be that. This scales with meta reservation efficiency, for example, from the passive tree or from Monk Evoker. So you can place down a lot of totems if you want to, and they're going to be really nice. But the bigger change here, even for me personally, is the spell totem change that you can now use it while moving. And there's also going to be an animation, which it was definitely weird that it had the same animation as the melee totems. You would basically stomp like you're a warrior as a caster. It was awkward as hell. But being able to cast while move is, yeah, absolutely crazy. Own separate video about that. Now, the leech changes are weird. You can only have one instance now of leech, so no more infinite leeching on Blood Mage. And you would think, oh, so I have to have one big hit, but they also capped it at 40,000. They did reduce the leech resistance on enemies. There's a lot of other small changes, which is funny because they wanted to make leech more practical than in PoE 1. At this point, I feel like it's actually more complex in PoE 2, but whatever. We're going to have to wait and see for this one. Number 3, Energy Shield got nerfed by nerfing its recovery. So faster start of Energy Shield got removed from a lot of base types and also from the tree. Everything got reduced. So some nodes that used to give 30 now give 12%. Faster start of Energy Shield and also Energy Shield recovery rate. Overall, it will be a lot harder to recover your Energy Shield, which might mean Disciple of Varashta is a lot more premium than it even was before, and it was already strong. And then you also have the Ghost Shroud changes on top, which mean that you cannot get Ghost Shrouds as often as you could before. Now, Deflect got changed, so you actually want to invest more into it. The curve is now a lot more linear, and getting to the cap, which is 95%, is now a lot easier. People have done kind of the math. You need around 20,000 deflection, but I didn't do it myself yet, so I'll have to look into that a little bit later. But Deflect might now be a lot more viable. Then we have Recombinators are deleted. Just straight up. Everything that has to do with Recombinators are also deleted. In general, I think Recombinators are cool design, but also there is this thing where you have so many different benches that you have to go to craft. This could obviously be streamlined, but they just sort of decided to remove it. Number 6 here, tablets of the same type can be used together to increase the amount of league content that is spawned. We already heard about this. You put in 3 tablets of something, you get 3 times the amount of league mechanics. But in the small text, they also say that certain mechanics that cannot have more than 1 encounter. So for example, Ritual, how does that even work? If you have put 3 in, get more significant encounters. And it will increase the size of the encounter, whatever that means. So we'll have to see, maybe there's more stuff spawning inside Rituals, for example. Maybe it means Delirium spawns more modifiers, you get faster progress, more rewards. Yeah, we'll see. Then we have a small line where it says modifiers to pack size also provide a chance to get additional rare monsters, which is interesting. So this, since PoE 2 is basically rare monsters drop all your loot, could be very significant. Then talking about the league mechanic, Runes of Elder, they did mention here that you can have up to 10 rune slots in the league mechanic, which before we thought it was 8. So they maybe decided against that here, which means for Expedition, these runes juice your Expedition. So it could be a big deal. It also might mean bigger rewards and a little bit more RNG towards the top end. Now then we have at number 9, cast on crit changes, 9 and 10, but they're both indirect. Cast on crit itself did not get touched. However, the biggest offenders here did. Dodra's Undoing, which was the skill that procced the most comets, no longer has the effect that it had. It is now, it spawns frogs that deal chaos damage. It's going to be probably awful. That's usually what frogs mean in the PoE universe, but either way, Dodra's Undoing, for all intents and purposes, removed from the game. And at number 10, also related, are comet changes here. We have a slight damage nerf of the normal comet, like 5% less damage, and the fire-infused version does significantly less damage. So maybe something like Living Bomb and adding that extra fire infusion is not even worth it anymore. We'll have to see, but it still does double your damage. And comet overall still got away pretty scot-free. Then we have a change that I found out about last league live, which is the Ancestral Warrior Totem hidden attack timer that now got removed. But it seems that it was not an accident, because now instead they added a delay that is 50% of the skill's attack time. Now this is a pretty big buff for fast hitting Ancestral Warrior totems. So we'll see how that pans out. I thought they wanted this to be like a slam totem, but instead it might be something like Molten Blast that I tried last patch. I didn't do the exact math on how much extra damage this is for the build. It's not a league starter anyways, but I might maybe give it a shot later in the league. Then out of all the nerfs in terms of uniques, Vertex is probably the biggest one. They just straight up removed the +4 to all skills from it. So your endgame chase helmet is now gonna be basically gonzo. They replaced it with +2 levels to curse skills, which is pretty funny. Number 13, I really dislike. So they made it so Expedition Explosives wait until you kill most of the monsters that are unearthed before the next explosive goes. So the way I'm envisioning this is it's going to be a lot slower because there's the animation, the monsters crop up, and then you have to kill them, and then the next one even starts. So in this league, which will be highly expedition focused, remember the Runes of Alder plays into expedition. I'm a little bit sketched out by this, and I think this will be a change that will be reverted in the next patch notes. It sounds awful. I really hope that we get something akin to Extreme Archaeology from Path of Exile 1. They already talked about one big boom expedition to counteract this issue, but we'll just have to hope it's a good note. Then we have a little line where it says Mirage Archer and Mirage Deadeye, so the ones that summon spectral copies of you to fire bow attacks, can now be used with channeled skills. For example, Snipe, Plasma Blast, and Detonating Arrow, and especially Snipe, of course, which we don't know if it will be able to perfectly align, or Plasma Blast, which is just a huge single target bonk, could be quite interesting, and this might make the whole archetype better. Could turn out to be the sleeper buff of this patch, or could be absolute dogshit. Then we have some new unique items where we only saw the names of, but 2 of them are interesting because they are Path of Exile 1 items that we kind of know what they do in Path of Exile 1. We first have Split Personality, which is a jewel that cares about how far you path out. And if you know anything about Path of Exile passive trees, you know that almost everybody has split personality pathing, where you just path not really around and take clusters, you just path on the outskirts and you take very little clusters. So might be sick. I don't know if we're gonna get attributes. Maybe this is a attribute stacker buff. And then we have Lore Weave, which depending on what it does in Path of Exile 2 could be a really interesting roster to give a little bit more flexibility in terms of defensive options. Pounce got nerfed from 4 seconds to 5.1 seconds at level 20, which I thought it would get nerfed quite a bit more. People will still be using this on your offhand, and people will still be using Temporalis to absolutely shred the game. This one quite surprised me. Also, there is now a dedicated keybind to perform your dodge roll, which is to say that for people who want more flexibility, that's good, but also for people who had the blink bug. If you guys know how sprinting is very annoying with blink, that should now be fixed with this addition. We have Bhatair's Vengeance, which was a huge payoff for a lot of the especially talisman and animal form fueled builds on the left side of the tree. It now only gives 1% extra damage per 2 rage, and only for 15 seconds instead of 20. So you'll have to press it a little bit more often, and it's only half as effective. Overall, probably well-deserved. It was completely busted, but at the same time, big nerf to archetypes that maybe did not deserve it. Then we have a weird tease. If you guys don't know, on period 2 DB, there is Overabundance 3, which is not in the game currently. It just isn't. It doubles the limit of the supported skill and applies curses to you, which can actually be helpful. You can actually get extra buffs with the notable Warding Fetish, which gives 30% increased damage per curse on you. So theoretically, you could curse stack on yourself and get increased damage for it and be curse immune with some nodes. But this one doesn't exist currently in the game, and it got patch nodes. I don't know. So is it going to be in the game? Is it going to get introduced? No idea. But it's there, and it's a really good support if it will be introduced. Then at number 20 or whatever we're at, there is a unique ring that got reworked called Priced Pain. And this one now has up to 25% chance to deal your Thorns damage to enemies you hit with melee attacks. So they don't have to attack you anymore. It's basically now a proc for whatever melee attack you have. And this sounds very exciting. It is reminiscent of something like Grim Dawn, where your Thorns actually plays into certain attacks and adds damage to your normal attacks. So you could have a Thorns hit-based build. Quite interesting, especially because you can have like an interesting assortment of weapons, because Thorns have their own base damage. You could have utility weapons. We'll have to see, but I might be experimenting with this one down the line. The next one is interesting. Divine Orbs are now more common, and it makes sense in the context of this other change, which I pulled together, which is that corruptions do not reroll the item anymore. it only multiplies what's already on the item. So why that makes sense to me is now you're going to need more divine orbs, because before corrupting, you already need to divine. And then afterwards, you will get the outcome that you want. That being said, you cannot force that anymore as much because the Omen of Corruption got removed. So it's going to be a little bit more random, but this could be a divine sync that the game desperately needed, and more common could mean anything from 5 times as common to double. Then we have a huge campaign change right here. Martial weapons and flasks are now more likely to be of the highest base type available. This is absolutely huge for finding the bases that you want with good modifiers, as well as that there's some small changes, like for example, the hybrid fizz roll cannot occur until level 8. They kind of delayed it a little bit, so when you go in town for the first time, if you applied an Orb of Transmutation on a weapon and it rolls Hybrid Fizz, that is terrible. All the other rolls are way better, so this is a huge buff for the first round about 15 levels, which in my opinion are the hardest in Path of Exile 2. Number 23. This one is exciting, but also a little bit of a doozy. Mark talked about reworking the passive tree and adding new nodes on the passive tree and making evasion, armor, and those nodes a little bit more effective. We haven't seen anything in the patch notes yet. Hopefully that's going to come. But what was in the patch notes was that the armor and evasion of body, or like armor modifiers on your gear, will be a lot higher now. He said in the interview that he felt like people are not tanky enough at their level if they're not energy shield. So it's approximately 33% more armor and evasion, and then it will taper off into endgame. Down to 15% more. That is still a pretty big deal. I was just hoping for a little bit more. Then we have the introduction of Fluxes, which is basically resistance swap from Path of Exile 1. What this means is if you have lightning res on an item, but you need fire resistance, you don't have to trade it anymore and then find your gear, or whenever you replace a gear piece, you now have to juggle everything around. You can change it from lightning to fire and so on. This also means that you can divine the ranges. So you can go back forth until you get what you want. We don't know how rare these are, so maybe that's not feasible, but it's really cool to have it in the game now. And then at the end, forget cast on crit with infinite comments. Forget ice shot and snipe one-shotting bosses. The real offender is here at the end, which is at 25. Parry got nerfed. It no longer has bonus attack distance. Finally, now we can move on with our lives. Another thing I forgot here is Poison Burst, Arrow, and Toxic Growth. The most played build last league, played by Fubgun. Poison Bow, which got nerfed multiple times. It got nerfed with Plague Fingers getting adjusted. It can now not apply elemental ailments anymore. Poison Burst Arrow got nerfed. Toxic Growth got crazy nerfs. Personally, seeing the performance of that build, I'm not 100% sure. This really feels like one of those where they just nerfed because it was played a lot, but there were a lot more egregious builds that did not get even half of the nerfs. There's obviously a ton of other changes that I missed. For example, Shield Wall got adjusted. We don't really know about the new armor values on shields, but for example, Fortifying Cry cannot shotgun anymore. So there's a lot of implications here, but if I put down everything, it would take forever. Stuff like Time of Need got nerfed. You cannot infinitely regain your life if you have 100% reduced duration. But in general, if you want to check out the patch notes, I'll link it down below in the description. And as always, I'm really excited for this. I will most likely be league starting Spell Totems. I will be POBing a little bit more over on twitch.tv/Palsteron in the next coming days. So we'll see what I come up with. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty stoked for this patch, especially the end game changes. I want to see how it feels. Does the game now feel a little bit better? They talked a little bit about layout changes, but only in the campaign section. So I'm not 100% sure what that's going to mean. Either way, though, there's a lot of builds I want to try out this patch, and I'll be playing for at least a month from what I can glean here. And yeah, really excited. I'll put my thoughts on Totems out soon. With that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.